We begin in the US, where the country has announced details on how it will allocate its first 25 million vaccine doses as part of a broader 80 million dose donation that it's making to shore up vaccine distribution in the rest of the world. The White House announced that at least 75%, or around 19 million of those doses, would be shared through the COVAX facility, which includes around 5 million doses earmarked for Africa. The rest will go to Latin America, the Caribbean, South and Southeast Asia. A further 6 million doses will be shared directly with neighbouring countries or those experiencing surges like India and the Palestinian West Bank and Gaza.
It respects existing regional networks for vaccine sharing, like the platform of the African Union and African Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the Regional Public Health Agency in the Caribbean, Harper. These networks will help decide where to allocate needed doses in regions with low vaccination rates and to those most at risk, including healthcare workers who haven't yet gotten their shots. Our approach also prioritizes South and Southeast Asia, including countries like India, Nepal, the Philippines, and others that are undergoing surges right now. In the days ahead, we will coordinate closely with COVAX and with countries that will receive our vaccines. And as Jeff has said, this is only the beginning. The president has committed to sharing doses on an ongoing basis, starting with 80 million by the end of June. We will continue to donate from our excess supply as that supply is delivered to us.
For more on this, we're now joined live by Washington correspondent Nick Harper. Nick, thanks very much indeed for joining us. So great news for the rest of the world, particularly developing nations on our continent. Does this mean that all is well at home in the United States?
Good evening, Peter. Well, it certainly suggests so. I mean, we have known for some time that these donations were due to begin. There has been some question as to why really it's taken quite this long and which countries would be benefiting. But here in the United States, certainly the vaccination rollout has been going particularly well in recent weeks, as well as announcing which countries will be benefiting from sending vaccines overseas. We also learnt in the last few hours that here in the United States, the number of new cases and the number of new deaths has reached its lowest level really since the pandemic began here in the United States back in March last year. A very low figure, about 15,000 new cases a day. It's a decrease of 30% on the 7-day moving average. So the US is saying that cases and deaths are dropping, that more and more people are getting vaccinated. However, we do know that there are certain pockets of the population who are resistant to getting those vaccines, even though they are free. And the White House is very much now in a race to try and meet its own goals, its own targets, to get millions of people vaccinated by a date that it has set, July the 4th, Independence Day here in the United States. And there is a possibility that it will miss that target if it is unable to convince those people in the United States who are unwilling to get vaccinated that now is the right time to get a shot.
All right, so these donations to developing nations, is this altruism or are there strings attached?
Well, the US is making it very clear that there are no strings attached. In that statement that the White House put out earlier on today announcing the news, they said we are sharing these doses not to secure favours or extract concessions. Now that seemed to be something of a veiled nod to the likes of Russia and China that the US accuses of having strings attached when they've said that they will donate their vaccines. We are seeing the United States essentially handing over the vaccines, the majority of them, 75%, as you said, to COVAX. So the likes of the African Union and other organisations can decide exactly which countries and which people in those countries should get the doses. The US isn't saying definitively these people in these countries should get them. So I guess, yes, there is some altruism involved, but the US has been heavily criticised in recent weeks for taking as long as they have, when the vaccination drive here in the US has been going so well, taking as long as they have to get these shipments out to countries that desperately need them.
And I would imagine that, yes, the COVAX facility is one area, but some of the regions and countries chosen, like Palestinian West Bank and Gaza will help a great deal with PR, if I use that word?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the Biden administration has come under a lot of pressure over the last couple of weeks when we saw that flare up in Israel between the Israelis and the Palestinians, that the US was continuing to do what it's done in the past, staunchly support Israel at the detriment of the Palestinians. There were people within President Biden's own party who were saying that he was hypocritical. The fact that he had accused other nations and called them out for human rights abuses, but that he was unwilling to do this in the case with the Israelis and the aerial bombardments they were carrying out, killing dozens of Palestinian civilians. So yes, certainly good PR if they are able to turn around and say, look, some of these doses we're earmarking for Gaza, for the Palestinians there who have been affected over the last few weeks, but on a longer term basis have been affected by COVID-19.
Is there any resistance, any political commentary fighting these donations?
Not really. I mean, across the board, it seems to be considered a good thing that the US is involved in this effort to help other countries, developing nations, especially after the harsh criticism that it has received. The Democrats have certainly been pushing for it. Republicans have been less vocal, but mainly because it's not their administration at the moment. And I think the very fact that 60 million of the eventual 80 million that the US is earmarking for other countries, 60 million of that is the AstraZeneca dose that hasn't been approved here in the United States, and as and when it isn't really needed because there are already 3 vaccines that are widely being circulated and used. So those 60 million doses, they are essentially just sitting on the shelf. They cannot be sent out overseas until the FDA approves them here for use in the United States, and therefore effectively saying they're safe for use around the world. But I think there is that question as to why that 60 million is just sitting there on the shelf when it could be used to get shots into people's arms much quicker if an FDA approval were able to be speeded up.
And so which vaccines are we looking at in terms of these donations? Johnson & Johnson and who else?
Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, BioNTech and Moderna as well. Those are the 3 that have been approved and that are being used in the United States. So the US had said that it would give 20 million doses of those 3 and then the 60 million other AstraZeneca doses at a later date. However, it's upped that from 20 million to 25 million, which is the announcement today. And that involves those 3 vaccines, the Pfizer, the Moderna and the Johnson & Johnson one.
What do we know about the Food and Drug Administration's looking into the doses made by, is it Emergent?
That's right, yes. There have been problems by one particular lab, the Emergent Biosolutions laboratory that was working on some of these doses when workers accidentally, essentially contaminated a batch affecting millions of doses of Johnson & Johnson that would have been sent out. Now, we are expecting something of an update in the next 24 hours or so. Friday was a day that was mentioned as a potential deadline. South Africa, I believe, has ordered about 30 million Johnson & Johnson doses, but that delivery of those doses has been affected quite simply because of that batch contamination at Emergent Biosolutions. So we are expecting some update to find out whether that can be speeded up. But that particular plant, that processing facility at the moment, is on hold while investigations to continue to make sure that there is no way that any future batch could be contaminated, ruining potentially millions of doses.
All right, getting back to the US and its vaccination program, what has been the resistance to taking the vaccine? Is it Donald Trump, who secretly took it himself, but he had been spreading a message almost as if to suggest this is a waste of time?
There's been a combination of factors, but I certainly think, and we know from statistics, that there are holdouts within Republican communities, people who feel that their president, the past president here, Donald Trump, when he downplayed the virus, downplayed the pandemic, was on the right track. So they are unconvinced that they need to get vaccinated. There are also people who are raising safety concerns. They feel that the approval process has happened far too quickly. They say that it's been rushed and they don't know the long-term potential side effects. So they're unwilling to put that vaccine into their body. There are also religious groups who are holding out. There are anti-vaxxers who are against really any type of vaccine, even for common diseases like measles here in the United States. They wouldn't get vaccinated for that, so they're certainly not getting vaccinated for COVID-19. So really a whole range of reasons at play. And don't forget that there are also some communities of colour who are mistrustful of the health community here in the United States. There were past studies where essentially African Americans were used as guinea pigs in vaccination trials. One particular one involved syphilis, and there is that worry amongst some black communities about getting vaccinated. They are hesitant to come forward to get a shot. So there are holdouts in different communities for different reasons, and that's really the White House is why they're trying to push it as hard as they can, even incentivizing it. We're seeing some states offering people the chance to be entered into a lottery to win $1 million if they get vaccinated. Other places offering everything from free donuts to free beer, things like vacations, an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl next year. So there really is this drive at the moment to incentivize it, to make sure as many as people as possible are getting vaccinated.
Nick, we'll leave it there. Thanks very, very much indeed for that update. All right, that's Nick Harper, Washington correspondent, telling us about this donations that are going to be made by the US to developing nations and to Africa through the COVAX facility, 80 million plus, so great news. And let's hope that we here don't resist, because by taking a vaccine, we're not protecting just ourselves, but those around us.